Hey everyone, welcome back to the Angular mini project series, where we take real world ideas and turn them into smart reactive apps using NgRx and RxJs. Today we are building something practical and fun, a live weather app using Angular 19 and NgRx. We will learn how to fetch real-time data from an API. We will make use of our NgRx Store and NgRx Effect to manage our state. And we will display everything beautifully in a responsive UI. So this video is perfect for someone who knows Angular basics and want to build something useful with real API integration and modern state management. So let's start with our project setup. So first we will open our terminal, and inside the terminal we'll create a new project. For that we will use ng new command. We'll call our application Angular NgRx weather app. It will be a standalone application which is like based on our latest Angular 19. So we do not want any routing for now. We'll set it as false and we will use styles as CSS. Now this will create our new Angular project. We will make our server side rendering as no, and it will create our Angular application. Once it has done that, we will open our terminal, and inside this we can drag and drop our application. So you can see this application NgRx weather app, it's already created, this one here. Okay, so we will open our terminal here, and inside the terminal we just need to drag and drop the folder. So we'll take it, drop it here, and that's it. Now we have our application running inside this. So we can open a new terminal and we can ng serve our application to see if it's running, and that's it. Once we save it here, we can go to localhost 4200, so this one, and we can see that we have got our Angular weather app. Now we can start building our app. So let's get started. So we'll go back to our terminal and we will install all the necessary libraries we need. For example, our NgRx Store Effect and our DevTools. So I'll use the ng-add command. So you can see I've got ng-add, NgRx Store, our effects, and our DevTools. Once we press enter, it will ask for our permission and we'll say yes, and it will install all these three libraries. Okay, there we go. So we have all the three libraries installed in our application. Okay, great. So now let's set up our OpenWeatherMap API. For that we need to sign up and grab our API key. Okay, so if we go here, you can see that we have got this API here, and when we open the dock here, you can see this is the one we will be using. So like this, we'll be using our API, and instead of latitude and longitude we will be using our city. As I showed you, depending on the city we will get the weather. So as you can see that we can do like 1000 API calls per day for free. So we will make use of the free subscription and we will create our account and get the API key. Okay, so for that we will sign in. If you don't have an account, you can create an account using here. So once you have created your account, you can go into API key section here, and you can see that you will be having your key here like this. So now we will copy this API key and we'll be using it into this API call. So with this API call, we will receive a response and we'll use that response to show our UI. So here you can see that we receive a weather here, and we will be making use of this description property. We will, in the main object here, we will also be using our temperature and our humidity. Okay, and we can also show our name of the city. So for example, this would be London or New York or any other city. Okay, so now we'll go to our VS Code and we will start with our project. Okay, so some things we need to do is, for our state management, we need to have our weather folder where we will have our models, our action, our reducer, and our selectors. So inside this src, inside the app, you can see we have our app component.html file and all of the other stuff. So here we will create our weather folder. So I'll save this as weather, and now I will, first of all, we will have our model which will define the interface of our application, right? So here I will say this will be our weather.model.ts, and inside this we will define our interface. So we'll have our interface here and we will have some properties. So one of the properties would be our city, right, which we will show user. So city of type string, then temperature. So these are properties we will be receiving from the backend from this API, right? So we'll be using this to show to our user in the UI. So we'll have a temperature property and this will be of type number, and we will have humidity. This will be of type number 2. This will be humidity. So just got a typo here. And then at the end we will have the description. So to tell the user if the weather is sunny or it's rainy or snowy and whatnot. So like this. So we have got city, we have got temperature, we have got humidity and description. Now we can have our actions. Okay, So actions define what our application actually does. So all the actions it will be doing. So we'll have here our weather.actions.ts file. Now we can have all of our actions for the weather app. So if you see at our application here, you can see that we write a city name and then we do a search. So we should have first action for our loading the weather, right, to send the request. So we'll type the city, which means we need to send the props using the city. Then our API in return will give us a success with a whole weather object. So we should have a load weather success action too. Okay. And then if for some reason the API fail, then we should have a load weather failure as well, which will return an error. So that's it. Do you see? That's how we define our action. So we'll start with the first one. We'll say export constant, and this would be our load weather, like this. And this one would be create action. And here, first of all, we will have our action message, and we will say what it is for. So first, it is for weather, okay. And what we are doing, we are loading the weather, right? So we'll say load here. And as you remember, I said this one it carries a payload, and payload will be our props. So we'll say props, and the props would be taking our city name. So here we will have the object, we'll say city, and that will be of type string, like this. So you see, that's how easy it is to create our action. So after this, like this, we will have our multiple actions, one for our success and our failure. So this would be load weather success, and in this one we'll say load success here, okay. And remember, this is really important, the string we write here, because this is what in turn will go and call our reducer, basically the message. That is how it knows what reducer to call. And this one would be our load failure, okay. So our this load weather, this action will get called, okay, and in turn this will call a effect. So in that effect we will be dealing with our HTTP request, and that will give us a success response where we will be calling this load weather success. So this will have our return weather response. So here we will have weather, and this will be of type of our this weather model, this one, you see, this one. So that's it for this one. Now we will have our load weather failure, and now in this one we will have a error property. So we are done with all of our three actions. Now we can define our reducer. So we will go into again here, create a new file, and we will call it weather.reducer.ts file. Okay, here we need to define our weather feature key first, which we will be using to select our state, okay. So here we will have first export constant, and we will call it weather feature key. So weather feature key, and this will just call it as weather, like this. That's it. Okay, now we need to define the weather state. So for that we will have an interface. We'll say export interface, and this will be for our weather state. So you see what I mean by this is basically whenever we're loading the API, we need to first have our weather, right? This is where we will be storing the whole weather data. So weather, this will be of type obviously weather, right? This weather dot model, and it can be null as well in the beginning, and it will have two more properties. So when we are loading the weather, it's communicating with the API. We need to have a loading. So the loading variable will tell the user that the data is still loading, so we can show a spinner or something, and our error. So these things also we get from our action, if you think. So this one you can see that whenever we export an action, obviously we will be loading, right? So for that we can show a spinner, and for failure we have the error. So you see, it all makes sense when we create something in our store. So this error will be of type string here and null, okay, like this. Now we need to initialize our weather state. So we will say here export constant and initial state. So initial state will be of type this weather state, right, this one, and then we will initialize it. We need to write all the properties. So weather, in the beginning it will be null, then we will have our loading, and in the beginning we'll set our loading as false, and we will have at the end our error property, which will be null. That's it. We are done with all of our initialization. Okay, so now we will start writing our reducer logic. So for that we will have here export constant, and we will have our three on methods, okay, for our load weather success, and load weather failure. So we will say export constant, this would be weather reducer. So we'll say weather reducer, and it will be equals to our create reducer. So we want to create our reducer, and we will have our methods inside this. So first of all, we'll define our initial state like this, and then we will have our 3 on handle. So first of all, we will have our on and we need to import it. So we'll import from NgRx Store, and here in order to use our action, we need to import them. So here we will say import. Now we can use our weather actions here. So we'll say weather actions dot load weather. So whenever this load weather action is called, that time we want to go to our reducer and we want to take our state. So we will take our state here and open our arrow bracket here, and inside this object we will say take the state, okay, and we want to change our other properties. So we want to set our loading. At this time we have sent the action, basically load weather, and we have started communicating with our API. We haven't got any response, we started communicating. So we want to set our loading as true, so we can show user a spinner and use this property in the front end that loading is true, then don't show any data, just show a spinner. And after this we'll have our another on handle, and here we'll have our success. So we'll say weather actions dot load weather success, and here we will take our state and we will take our weather property. So you remember we have the weather payload coming from the action, right? So it's our response we get from the API. So we'll say weather here, and in this one here we will open our arrow bracket, and inside this we will take our state, and after this we will take our loading property and set it as false, because at this point we have got the data, so we don't want to show the spinner anymore. We'll set our loading as false like this, and then at the end we will give our weather property this weather data, the one we get, so like this. So that's it, we have done with our success action as well. Now last action left is our error. So for that we can just copy this whole thing, and instead of weather here we will having our error property, which we'll be getting from our error action. And our loading here we will just set loading as false, okay, because we are actually done. And we will remove this, and we will be changing our error property and giving it this value, so this one. That's it. So that's it. Now we are actually done with whole of our reducer logic too. Now comes the most important part, where we get the data actually from the store. So in our front end, like for example in the TS HTML file, whenever we actually want to get data from the store, we use our selectors to get the data. So selectors are functions which help us to get specific part of our state. So if we want to get, for example, a loading state, or we want to get just the weather or our error, then selectors help us to do that. So we will create our selector file here. So inside this we will create our weather.selector.ts. So weather.selectors.ts file. So first of all we need to select the whole application state. So for that we will have here, we'll say export constant, and we want to select weather state. So we'll say select weather state here, and this will be our create feature selector, okay. So when we want to select the whole state of our application, that time we use create feature selector. And when we want to select specific part of our application, like state of specific part, then we use create selector, okay. Remember that. Now in create feature selector here, first of all we will have our weather state and our weather key. So for that we need to import our reducer here like this. Now inside here, when we define our create feature selector, we need to give it the state. So here we'll say from weather dot weather state. So you see this weather state we are giving, our weather loading error, this one we created. I'll show you this one. So we have given this weather state to our selector, okay. So now our selector have the idea, but we also need to chain our key. So we need to give our key to here. So we'll say from weather dot our weather feature key. So our weather feature key is this weather. So this is how they are connected. Okay, so now our selector has access to the whole weather state, okay. Now we can give it some specific part using our create selector. So we need selectors for 3 things. One is to select the weather, so we can show user the weather properties. Then other is to select the loading, we can show the spinner, and the last one is for our error if there is some problem. So for that we will have our export constant, and first one would be our select weather. So basic, we want to select the weather. For that we need a selector, so basically to get the weather data. So we'll use create selector, and remember, not create feature selector, this time create selector. And this one, it will take our state, so this state, select weather state. After that we have access to all the state inside this, which were our these ones, weather, loading, and error. So which one do we want? We just want our weather at this point. So here we will take our state like this, and we will say that take our weather from it. So state dot weather, and that's pretty much it. We are done with our first create selector. same way we can have our loading and our error. So I'll just copy this. Okay, and when we want to get our loading, that time we will again have here state dot loading. Okay, that's it. And for our error, we will have state dot error. So you see how easy it is with NgRx Store. All the code is mostly same. So once you know how to do your stuff, then it's actually pretty easy to set up the whole thing and you have a perfect state management in place. Okay, now comes the part where we will actually handle our API. So as I told you, you remember whenever we will dispatch our this action, load weather, from our component file, this action will in turn call our effect. That effect will communicate with our API and give us a success response. And we can get that data from our selector, and that's pretty much it. So for that, now we need to create our NgRx effect. So inside this weather folder, we will create our NgRx effect file. Okay, so we will call it weather.effects.ts. That's it. Now we can write our effects logic inside this file. So we will create our class and we will call it our weather effects. So it will be weather effects. Okay, and this class we will make it injectable. Now we can define our effect here. So now in our effect we need two things. One is our actions and one is our HTTP client. So we need to inject both of this stuff. So we'll start by defining them. So we'll say private actions, and whenever we define our action here, we use $, and we will say here inject, and we will inject our actions inside this. So you see actions, they come from NgRx effect. And same way we will inject our HTTP client too. So we'll say private HTTP equals to inject, and we will call here HTTP client. You see it comes from Angular common. And that's it. Now we can define our load weather effect. So we'll say load weather, and whenever we define effect, as I mentioned, we use $, and we'll use our create effect. So we'll say here create effect comes from NgRx effect, open our arrow bracket, and we can write our logic. So we need to call this effect only on some specific action. So as I mentioned, it will be when we will be calling our load weather action, which is this one with our city name. That is when we want to call this effect, right? So we will use here this dot actions dot pipe. So we want to pipe it and we want to call it on some specific type. So we'll use of type, which comes from our NgRx effect. Okay, so we'll say of type. So we need to import our load weather action here. Now here we can say load actions dot load weather. So whenever our load weather action, if this is called, then only we want to trigger this effect and get our response from our API. Okay, so now here after this, when this action is called, we want to call our switch map. So inside the switch map, we will pass our city. So here we will have our payload. So the payload which we are receiving in this action is our city, right? The city which the user writes. So here it will have the city here, and then we will open our arrow bracket. That's it. Now inside this arrow bracket, we will make our HTTP call. So we'll say this dot HTTP dot get. So we want to make a get request to our weather API, right? So here we will have our weather API, and this will be of type any, like this. So we need to have our weather API, and this API will have our city, the city which will pass. So we'll make it a dynamic API. Okay, so I will take this API and put it here. So you can see I've got a HTTP request to API OpenWeatherMap. Okay, we're using 2.5 version. Here we take weather. So the query, you see, the query we do is using this dollar variable, we pass our city, which is dynamic. Okay, so this city is the one which we will pass using our action here. You can see. So it could be London, New York, or whatnot. So then we get it here using our switch map, and we pass it into our dynamic API. Okay, so make sure to change this your API key to your specific API key. Otherwise your application won't work, because you need to put it here. So if you go to here in our OpenWeatherMap API.org, if you click here on your profile, you can get your API key from here. So just copy and paste that API key, nothing else. So I will put my API key here. Okay. Okay, so after this we can pipe our response and we can call our success action. Okay, so here we will say pipe and we'll map. Okay, and inside this we will take our response, the response we get, and then we can call our load weather success action. Okay, so we'll use our this load actions dot load weather success. Okay, and now inside this we will have our response object. So as you remember, we have our weather, And this weather, as you remember, the weather model we created, it has a lot of properties like this one. So it has city, temperature, humidity, and description. So we just need to fill all those fields. So here we will have city, and it will help you to write it because we have given it the type. So city, it will be of type response we will receive. So response dot name. Now, if you think where I'm getting this whole response, like what to fill, you will think that in city, what do I actually write response.name, and then in temperature, it will be response.main.temperature. So how do I get to know, what do I have to write on the right hand side? Inside our response here, I have got response.name here, so I can get the name here. And then if I want the temperature, then I can go response.main.temperature, like this response.main.humidity. So we can get all the different properties we need. And for our description, we can go response, this one weather, and as it's an array, so we'll say response dot weather at 0 dot description. So like this, you can get your different properties. So now we will have our temperature, and as I said, temperature would be response dot main dot temp. Okay, and then we have our humidity. So humidity would be, so it will be humidity like this, and humidity would be our response dot main dot humidity like this. And at the end we have our description, and this would be response dot weather, and this would be array, so we'll take 0 dot description. So like this. Okay, so now we have done our success response, but for some reason if our API fails and there is a problem or the error, then we need to handle our load weather failure action too. So for that, after this map, we need to handle our catch error. So here we will say catch error like this, and with this one it will take a error property, open our arrow bracket, and this we need to make sure it's of type observable. So here we'll say use of RxJs, we'll say load weather failure, and here this one it will take our error property, which will be basically error which we received dot message like this. And if it's not the case, like if it cannot find the object message, then we can just say like failed to load the message, and that's it. So now we have handled both of our cases, which is our load weather failure and load weather success. Great, so now we can go and start writing our UI. So we'll go into our app component.html file, and we'll remove all of this stuff, and now we can start writing our HTML. So here we'll have a div, and we will give it a class, and we'll call it container, and inside this we will have first of all our h1 heading, and we will call it live weather app. And now we will have our input property. So the input property, as you can see, is where the user will write our city. So it will enter the city, and it will have a button where it can get our weather. After clicking, we will show this whole list of weather. Okay, so now we will bind this input to our component. So as you know, whenever user writes this, we want to connect it to our component. So for that we will be using ngModel. So we'll say here ngModel, and we will bind it to our city variable, which we will create in our TS file. Okay, and the placeholder we can say enter city. Okay, that's it. Now after this we will have a button, and the button will say get weather. So this button will be called after writing the city, and it will trigger a click event. At that time we will call our get weather method. So this method will be called to get our weather. Inside that we can have our dispatch with our city name, okay, which we'll get from here. Great, so now we will have two more things. One, we will have a loading spinner. So we'll show here a loading spinner, okay, and we will show here a error property if for some reason there is error. For both of this we have selectors which will give us this data, and we will have a div where we will show our weather properties. So our name of the city, our weather, what does it look like, and all those things, temperature and humidity. So now we'll go in our component, and we will create all these things first, and we'll come back to this HTML. So as I said, we have the city variable which we have defined. So now we've defined our city variable as empty string in the beginning, and we will inject our store like this, and that's it. Now we can define our three variables, which would be our weather observable, our loading observable, and our error observable. And why we have all of these three? Because if you remember in our reducer, you can see that we have got weather, loading, and error. These are our states. So we need to have this state in our TS file, and we are using them actively. So here we will say weather observable, and this would be this dot store dot select, and now we need to have our selectors. So this time we want to get our select weather. As you can see in the selector, this one. So it will give us our weather. Then we'll do same for loading and for error. So we'll import our selectors here, weather.selectors. Okay, that's it. And we will say from selectors dot select our weather. That's it. So now this observable will have our weather, and to load it, we'll just take this observable directly and use our async pipe in our HTML. So no need to subscribe to it and then destroy it. We don't need to worry about that. Angular provides us with async pipe, which we can use it in the HTML. Same we will do with our loading observable and our error observable. So that's it. So it will get our error state, this will get the loading state, and this will get our weather state. That's it. Do you see how easy it is now to get the data from the store? Now we need to have implement our this get weather method. Whenever user writes the city name, they are going to click on the button and it will get us the weather. So for that we are going to communicate with our API, right? Now first we will define our method. So we'll say get weather, and what it will do is it will dispatch an action. So you remember the action which starts the whole process is this load weather. It takes a city which we get from our HTML. This one here, right? See, it all makes sense now. So here we need to dispatch our action. So we'll say this dot store dot dispatch, and to dispatch the action we need to import our actions here. So we'll say import asterisk as from actions, and it will be coming from again dot slash weather slash actions. That's it. So now here we'll say from actions dot load weather, and if you remember, load weather takes a prop, the payload, which is city, so which we can take it from here. So that's it. We can pass our city here, and we can say this will be equals to this dot city. That's it. Okay, so now whenever user clicks this button, our get weather button, this method will get called, and this method will call this action. And whenever this action is called here, you can see, and this action will in turn call our effect, and this effect will call our API, and the API will give us either a success or a failure response, and it will store in our reducer here. And then this load weather success updates our weather data, so it has in our state. So then using our selectors, we get the load weather state, this one select.weather, and load it into our HTML. Great. So now we actually know that our whole data is inside this. Okay, now we will be using our ngIf directive to show this data. So in the HTML, we'll only show this data, all the specific bit, only when they are present or when they are true. So we can import both our common module and forms module inside the import section. So just say common module here, and our forms module, which we need to import from Angular Forms. So we'll say here import forms there. So now we can take this and put it in the import section. So now we can go and use our ngIf conditions and all the other stuff and won't be getting any errors. So now to display our weather, we will use ngIf, and we will say our weather observable, and we will use the async pipe with it. So here we will say async, and we will import it as weather like this. Now here we can display all of our weather data. Okay, use the curly bracket and we'll say weather.city. Then we'll have p tag, and inside that we can write our description. So we'll say weather.description. After this we'll have our temperature and our humidity. So that's pretty much it. Now to show our loading, we want to show user a loading spinner. So till the time our data fetches, we want to show user a loading spinner which loads till our loading is true. As soon as our loading becomes false, then we can show this, right? So for that we will just show it like this. So we'll have the div, and we'll use again our ngIf. We'll say loading async pipe. We will have this class called spinner container, and inside this we'll have a div class called spinner. So this is where we'll put our CSS and show a loading spinner. Okay, same we will do for our error too. And for our error, it's just pretty easy. We'll just have our again ngIf, and we will say here error async, and we will show our error like this if there is any error. So that's pretty much it with our HTML. Now we can go in our CSS file and do our styling. So I've already got some predefined CSS written here. This is for our basic container. We have got like all the basic stuff, and now we'll have styling for our this spinner too. So like this. So we have got all the styling, and you can get all the styling file from our GitHub link, which I'll give in the description. And moreover, the whole code you can get from the GitHub link too. And just to make it look better, I'll just give this like a background color of like this light green, and that's it. And I make this border look black. So like this. So it will be visible. Great. So now we need to go into our app config file and we need to register our store here. So for that, first of all, we need to import our effects, our reducer, and our feature key. So I'll say import asterisk as from effects, okay, and this would be from dot slash our weather slash weather dot effects. Same way we will import our reducer too, like this. So now we have access to our effect and our reducer. So now we need to register them here. Okay, so we need to provide store like this. Now we need to provide our state too. So we'll say provide state like this, and here we need to pass our feature key and our reducer. So if you remember, both of them come from our weather.reducer file. So we'll say from reducer, this one dot, we'll take our feature key. So you remember feature key is this weather key, this one, and we will have our state here. So we will, for that we'll say from reducer dot weather reducer. So we have got our weather reducer and we have connected it to our this feature key in our provide state. Now we need to provide our effects too. So for effects, we always provide them in an array. So here we will give our weather effect which we have imported. So this one. So from effect. So we'll say from effects dot our weather effect. So this one. Great. So if we save this and we go to our application, we see nothing's there. So I'll inspect and see that inside our weather.effect we are using HTTP client. So we need to inject it. Okay. So providers. So here I'll put HTTP client module and we need to import it from Angular common, and that's it. Okay, now if we save this and we go back to our application and we search the city here like London, so click on get weather, you see I've got London, it says broken clouds here, temperature, humidity, and everything is working fine. And I can search for different city like Barking, or I could search for New York, and it should work all fine. It says the temperature and it works fluently. So now you can see that whenever I do a search, you also get a spinner, right? So I will go into my effects file here, and just to make our spinner look better, like so you can see it, I will put a pipe here, and here I'll put a delay. So I'll say delay our request by like 1000 ms, that's it. So now once we save it and I search for London, you will be able to see our actions and our selectors better. So you see the spinner loads, then only we see our data, because at that time if we go in our HTML, our this observable was true, so it was showing us this, and as soon as it became false, it stopped showing this and started showing this. So you see how well written it is, and we can search for any city and it will show us the data perfectly. So see, when I search, the spinner loads and then we get our data. And that's it. That's our live weather app, which is powered by NgRx effect. So I hope you learned a lot of NgRx stuff in this video. So if you found this video helpful, then please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.